Thank you everyone for attending tonight's user group session. It's great to see everyone in person. And for those online, we're hoping we can see you in person sometime soon as well, now that we're back in a full hybrid mode for this year. Before we get started, just a little bit of housekeeping. We are recording this video to post it to our YouTube channel later. If you do not want to be on the recording, just stay muted and you'll be in the clear. So just by way of introduction, my name is Dimitri. I'm one of the co-founders and co-hosts of the Boston Office 365 user group. Along with me, I have Bill Gunning, who's in attendance here as well. You might notice that Mike is missing from this slide. He has taken a step back temporarily to focus a little bit more on life and his career. So we wish him the best and hopefully he'll be back soon. So let's dive into the agenda for tonight. We'll start with going through our regular Microsoft 365 updates, just a few of the key things that have been announced since the last time that we've met that might be of interest. We'll give a quick shout out to the sponsor for tonight. We have a special request from Mark Cashman, that is part of Jeff Tieper's team at Microsoft, part of the M365 group. Then we have Chris Kent, who's our featured speaker tonight. And then afterwards, we'll go to a little bit of Q&A. We'll talk about community events. We have a raffle at the end, and then we are, those that want to, we can get a drink around the corner. So let's dive into the updates. All right, Office 365 updates. So there's been a lot of questions and a lot of buzz about Stream, especially Stream Classic. Now that Stream on SharePoint or Stream Modern is the new version of Stream. So Microsoft has this week announced a retirement date for Stream Classic, which is going to be in about a year from now. Additionally, you're going to be blocked from uploading classic videos later this summer, I believe in May. And then later this year, you won't even be able to access that unless you go into your admin center and you enable it to let you carry on until February. So there's a great link at the bottom of the slide. Check it out. Microsoft does offer a first-party migration tool using Mover to help move stuff out of Stream into SharePoint. So if this is not on your 2023 roadmap, I would highly suggest making this a priority. Moving on, so the wiki feature in Teams channels is being retired. I don't know, for the old wikis, you can still access them, but going forward, it's all going to be in OneNote. And you'll also have the ability to export the wiki into OneNote so you can carry on for channels that have a lot of content in the wiki. I certainly welcome this change. I was never a fan of the wiki functionality the way it was implemented. And I think OneNote is going to give you a much richer experience. Power Automate. Premium connector changes. So Microsoft has been working on a new model where premium connector providers can actually pay for the premium connectors usage instead of requiring each user on the client side to have a license for the premium connector. So what this means is that instead of, previously if you had a Power App or if you had a flow that sent a document for e-signature, everyone that ran that flow needed to be licensed with premium, or you pay for the per flow license, which was there as well. With this change, DocuSign is going to pick up the tab on whoever wants to use the connector, so you no longer need to have that premium license to use a premium connector for DocuSign. The reason we highlight this is not because of DocuSign, but because I think this is going to pave the way for a lot of other premium vendors to be able to offer this as part of their overall cost, because you're still paying DocuSign in this case for the service. So this should hopefully restrict or at least reduce the amount of friction to using some of these connectors. Moving forward, Microsoft continues to improve on the Microsoft Lists app, which is also your Lists app inside of SharePoint. They are introducing a new calendar week layout view, which gives us a little bit more ability to drag and drop items and make it look a little bit better than just a monthly view or a daily view. Moving forward, so Microsoft is releasing the feature for SharePoint where you can request an external file. So think of a scenario where you're an accountant and your customer is asking, you need to retrieve secure documents from your customer, right? You need their W-2s, you need their 1099s, et cetera. In today's world, you'd have to go and break inheritance, or you'd have to go and share a folder out with an individual. And it makes it as a very tedious process if you're dealing with a lot of clients. The external file request link sends a link out that could be anonymously accessed, but users can only upload content. They cannot see what's there. They can't download anything. They can't edit or delete anything. So this works perfect as like a Dropbox type of thing where you send out a link, people give you files, you move them, and you sort them where it needs to be. And if you apply the SharePoint syntax content organizer or some of these other where Power Automate flows, you can actually build a pretty neat workflow depending on what the contents are. So this is rolling out early next month. It should be available by the end of next month. Moving forward, Microsoft is retiring support for Teams Mobile on devices running iOS 14. iOS 14 is about 1.5 years old, so it's not ancient. So it is 2 versions behind the latest. 16 is the latest one. So if you have users that are running the older version, now would be a good time to get them updated. If you have Intune, there's a nice report that can pull that information back. If you're using other MDM solutions, that's also available to you. A neat feature is coming to Microsoft Viva. So if you're scheduling a meeting that has a lot of participants or things that looks like you might need some prep time, you can get a new toolbar within Outlook that says, would you like to book some time leading up to the meeting for prep time? This could be so you can review what you're presenting, gather your thoughts, gather your latest versions of the slides and documents. And in doing so, if you say yes, accept to book time, you have the ability to select you want 15 minutes to prepare, 30 minutes, an hour, and so forth. Just another way to kind of help us segment our day from being in back-to-back meetings from sunrise to sunset. Do you need the Viva Insights license? So next feature is one that I've been very closely following in preview, and this is the OneDrive Sync Report or Sync Health Report across your organization. So this is going to give you the ability to see which of your employees are having problems with OneDrive before they report a problem, or even worse, they don't know they're having a problem and they're wondering why their files are not up to date in the cloud or on different devices. So this will automatically give you areas of concern. It'll show you how many of your users have the known folder redirection, meaning your desktop, documents, photos are actually stored in OneDrive. So this is an invaluable tool for IT to be more proactive when there is an issue. Highly recommend it if you have not been playing with this yet. Next, there's a new feature that's coming out to Teams to provide for sign language view. So if you're, let's say, having a large town hall and you have a sign language interpreter that's there, you can give them a dedicated video window next to the main presentation so that all employees joining would be able to follow that along.
That work?
Well, you basically think of it like a kind of like a mini spotlight where you pick a user that continues to be spotlighted alongside with the main presentation. And this is actually rolling out now, so this should be available fairly soon. Another feature that's rolling out now is the speaker coach in Microsoft Teams. So let's say you're preparing to give a big presentation and you really want to make sure that you're doing this as smoothly as possible. You could practice in front of the mirror, or better yet, you can set up a meeting with yourself on Microsoft Teams and go through your presentation. And this AI will detect, and based on the transcriptions, understand if you're going too fast, if you're going too slow, if you're putting in filler words, and give you recommendations for how you could do this better. Of course, you could also turn this on for any meeting and then get feedback whether or not you're doing a good job according to these metrics.
That's the same tool that's in PowerPoint. They have a PowerPoint coach.
Yep, absolutely right.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
So huge thanks to the company I work for, Turn Digital, who's our platinum sponsor. Thanks for all the food and ongoing support to keep this organization legally in check, accounting-wise and everything else. So thanks to them. And that being said, I want to move into a special request from Mark Cashman. So Mark is working with Jeff Teeper to prepare a video backdrop for their keynote at the Microsoft 365 conference that's coming up in May in Las Vegas. And as part of their segment, they want to give us a shout out to all of the communities that are coming together and, continuing keeping the local areas active. So they would ask us to record a very short video, just basically saying, this is the best community in tech and a quick hello from Boston. So for those that are here in person, we have a camera set up there. We're not going to do that this minute, but maybe towards the end of the session, if we could steal 2 minutes of your time, it'd be great to be included as part of that. All right, so without further ado, we have a great presentation tonight from Chris Kent about advanced list formatting. And Chris, I'll pass the mic over to you.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee, so little ways away. Let me share my screen and we'll get going here. All right. If you guys can just let me know if you can see it, and we'll get going here. We good?
Good.
All right. Whew. Okay. So let's just jump in. I've got just a few slides, and then we're just going to jump into demos. So this is me. I was up there. I was in the Boston area in Burlington. At the end of October? Is that what it was for the Collab Days? It was an awesome event. And if you guys, for those that didn't get a chance to attend, I hope you get to attend this next year. It was really well done. And I had a chance to meet several of you there. But this is me. You can reach out on all these things. And there you go. Let's move on. Oh, I guess I should tell you that I'm a consultant. I'm an MVP, and I'm part of the PNP core team, where I specialize in, not surprisingly, list formatting, but also the SharePoint framework. So let's talk about what is list formatting and what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to talk about, the different types of list formatting. So whether that's column formatting, view formatting, we're going to take a look at forms formatting. And we're actually going to jump into some more advanced areas, hence the name advanced. And so we often hear that this stuff is low code, and that sounds great until you see this JSON stuff and you're like, what? Right? What is this junk? It certainly looks like code, but Microsoft will assure you that it is not code. But we're going to pretend maybe there's no one from Microsoft in the room. I don't know. I can't see him. So we'll just say there's not, and then we're going to jump in there and we're going to talk about all the different ways that this is code and how it's not near as scary as you might think, and how it's a great jumping off point without having to be a full-on developer. And I'll show you a ton of different resources and things that you can use to make that a lot easier. So we've got a number of tools that are available both from Microsoft and from third parties that are going to make that a lot easier too. Okay, so with all of that, let's talk briefly here. So list formatting is these three different things, right? So it was released in, I think it was like November of 2017 for SharePoint Online, and provided that column formatting. So when it first came out, it was just, if you can find out how to figure out this JSON, you just paste it in a little window. It reminded me of the old content editor web parts. And it's gotten a lot better since then. There are continually been updates since that release, starting with view formatting, and then more recently we had the form formatting, but we can also do groups and command bars and all sorts of different types of views, like the calendars and the boards and so on. So, but really it just means pretty lists, right? So the first thing I want to get out of the way is this thing called JSON, which stands for JavaScript Object Notation, which in our case, yeah, we don't care at all about that. That's just what it is. What we really mean is just a text file that you write with squigglies and square braces, and we'll take a look at what that looks like here in just a moment, but it has nothing to do with JavaScript, even when you might want it to sometimes. So the idea of column formatting is you can apply this right in the field settings, and it's going to be stored with the field or with a site column. And then wherever that field is used, it's going to have the format applied to it. And you just go to it by formatting this column. You can also go to the classic settings, and you're just going to paste thing in this nice little box they give you, and you can work with it there. It's got a nice Monaco editor, which is really just VS Code in the browser. So it's pretty easy to work with. And again, stored with the field, which is awesome, especially when using them in site columns. That way people can just pick them up and add them to their list wherever they need. And then form formatting. This is fairly new. This is only for Office 365. Column formatting is available in 2019 if you're still using that. But the idea here is it's a superset of column formatting in the header and footer, which means that everything I show you for column formatting, for the most part, is going to apply there. But when you get to this body section, I want to call out that while it is JSON, it's its own thing. So it's not formatting. You can really just do sections and what columns you want in those sections. You get a lot of questions about how do I make that section title, have an icon, or I want to add extra text around this thing, and that's not possible with that, and we'll cover that. That's an important thing to call out. And you paste it there, and that is stored with the list. And I'm telling you where these are stored because all of these things play nicely with provisioning, right? So whether you're doing the PNP remote provisioning or you're doing some of the template stuff like the new list template things, we're bringing some of those things out. All of that is included. So if you're making your own list templates, you can include formats in that. If you're using the out-of-the-box ones that Microsoft provides, they've got a bunch of formats that come with that too. So woohoo! All right, and view formatting finally. So this is a superset of column formatting, and what we're going to do is you're going to apply this to the views, individual views, which actually makes these really, really powerful because they're stored with the view. That means you can have the exact same data, the exact same list, right? But you can have all sorts of different views on these, right? So you can have a dashboard that's for management, but you can have a task view for the people that actually have to do the work, and so on. And the main thing to note here is that there are different kind of flavors of it. And if you're doing what's called a row format where you control everything, it's going to override your column formats. Okay. Now, let's actually take a look at some of these things so that we know what we're talking about. So first off, everything I show you tonight is available as a sample. We've got 200 plus. Actually, I think the number's closer to 250 at this point. Samples that are available. They're free. They're in GitHub. In GitHub might seem scary, but I'll show you how you can use it. You don't have to be a fancy developer. We just find the stuff and we hit a copy button and we paste it in and then we tweak it from there. Okay. All right. But again, I've got that link here at the bottom right here, this PNP/list formatting. You can also go to this other link that's at the bottom of every slide. And when you go there, you can find that from there. And this link right here will take you to our main sample site, which again, I will show you how to navigate. All right. So what are we talking about? All right. So let's say you got this list, right? And this has got a bunch of formats applied to it. And that's what we're talking about. So when we show that we've got this progress bar, we've got magical faces, right? We've got due dates that are red, and we've got all sorts of things going on that make this list not just Excel in the browser, right? We can go so much further now. But let's take a look at the surfaces, and we'll go through this again really quickly because I want to get to all the demos because I like the demos. All right, so there's the surface, right? So whether this is a web part, this is Microsoft List, right? This is the traditional list view. It's all coming from the same spot, right? In SharePoint, everything is just a list. And whether that's in Teams, right? So Teams is also a spot where you can apply this stuff in format. So there's the basic surface, and then there's kind of the standard UI that you get there, right? Where you get the headers and all the other stuff. And then by default, you get your standard rendering, right? So your percentage fields are going to have a percent on them, right? You're assigned to is going to have these people like this and so on, right? But then you could apply column formats here. So that will apply to each individual column, and that's going to take the data in that column, and you're going to make it look however you want. Whether that's fancy or not, then there's the idea of a row class, which can be applied on top of your column formats. And this is the idea that you can apply like a color, or you can apply a border or something else. And you can do that conditionally for an individual row. I like to do this for things where I'm assigned to me. So I can just highlight those. And the nice thing about that is dynamic. So whoever visits the list, their rows will be highlighted. Pretty cool. All right. And then you could go even crazier and you could do row formatting, which is where you're going to have a whole view format and you're going to override everything, right? That means you're responsible for drawing all of it, which again is powerful, but it's an advanced kind of scenario. And you can do that with tiles as well. So that's that gallery view. And you can apply these in conjunction, right? So you can have column formats, you can have row formats, and you can have the view formats on top of this. And you can even have in that same format a gallery format. So again, you can go hog wild. I don't know why you want to, but you can, right? And then you can also hide that standard UI. So you can get rid of the header and you can put your own thing in there. You're going to lose a lot of functionality, but sometimes that's exactly what you want. And then, of course, if you're doing some grouping, so you're grouping by columns, you can actually apply formats to those. So these are the standard renderings, but you can apply formats, individual groups, the header and the footer of the groups, but you can also apply it to the aggregate rows down here and the aggregate rows in the groups. And then, of course, there's the form where you can apply your column formats. Are going to show up right in the form by default. So if you apply a column format over here, it's going to show up, and that's nice. But then you can go even further, and you could apply a header, and you could apply a footer, or you could apply formatting, and then you can also specify the sections and the order of those columns in those sections in a body layout. And then even further, one of the newest things is the command bar props, and we'll take a look at this. And this is, you can customize that command bar, which can be really, really helpful. Right now, there's no UI for it, but if you want to turn off a button that keeps getting users in trouble, or it really isn't important to them, you can do that with a pretty simple, I say simple in quotes, view format. And I'll show you how to do that and where you find the documentation on it. All right, so everybody's still with me? I can't see you, so I'm just going to assume yes. Feel free to interrupt me, by the way. Just, hit Dimitri or something, and he'll let me know. All right. Let's take a look. Ooh, that's a fancy transition. Now, I've been showing this one for a while, and the reason I show this is because I hope it takes away the fear of what we're looking at with JSON. We're going to go through this very quickly, but the idea here is I would just want to assure you that a format, when I say JSON format, it's just text like this. This is an actual format, and it looks, kind of crazy at first, but as you start to look at this, you realize, oh, I get what's happening. Everything inside a curly brace is basically a box, and then I'm going to put more boxes in there. So all of this is going to render a column like this. It's going to put a pink around it. It's going to put a little icon and the text, whatever's in that column. If you're looking at that, again, it's just a bunch of boxes. So it's 3 boxes here. I've got a big box and I got 2 little boxes, right? The big box holds everything, a little box for the icon and a little box for the text. And if you're really interested, all we're doing is just making HTML in the hardest way possible. And so what we're really doing is taking this and we're generating the HTML, but you can't write that directly unless you use one of the tools I'll show you. Ooh, all right. So the first thing up is the schema. You'll see this in every sample we have, but it's really just to get IntelliSense. So if you're doing something in VS Code or you're doing it there in the editor, it's not required and it's not validated. And in fact, when you go to do it, sometimes you'll see an error. And it's actually not an error in your format, it's an error in the schema, and we'll go over that. But if you don't want that, you just get rid of the schema. That's all that is. And so the first thing you do is you say an Elm type. So you say, what kind of box do you want? And I say, I want a div, which is pretty much the standard one. That's the one you're going to use the most, right? And then you're going to say, I want a class associated with it. There's a whole bunch of these classes. And this SP field dash severity dash severe warning really just means mildly pink background, right? Of course it does. But I'll show you where you can find those as well, because those aren't really listed anywhere. But we have a list on the PNP site for you. So that's what that does. And then the idea here is I want to put stuff inside this pink box that I've got. So I need children, right? So that's what you call it when you want things stuffed inside there. And so I've got this in 2 children. And the only reason I've got it in 2 children is so I can have a little space between that icon and the text. So the first child, I'm saying is a span just because I want it inline. And then I say I want an icon. Now there are 1,800, actually there's closer to 2,000 plus icons now. And all you do have to do is specify them by name. They are case sensitive, but the warning icon is this little triangle with an exclamation point. You just write that in there, boom, you got an icon, wow. And then I say, I don't want it right up against that edge because I got that pink background, so padding left 4 pixels. So when I write style, that's just like a style property with CSS. These are whitelisted, but for the most part, all of your standard kind of CSS properties are available. Every once in a while, you got to run across one and be like, why? Why not that one? And you'll cry. All right. And then we want another span. And this is where we're going to see our first kind of magic text, right? So a placeholder token is what we call these. Right. So, and you'll see these always begin with that @ symbol. So @ current field. And what we really mean by that is whatever that value of that column is on this row, just slap it in there. All right. So my text content, I want to be current field. Now, the nice thing is if it's a number field, it'll come back as a number, a date. If it's a person, you'll have a person. You'll have sub properties like email and title and so on. So it's a really powerful way to do that. And there's a number of these, like you can do @now to get the current date and time. You can do @me to get the current user's email address. You can think about the window heights and so on. And again, those are all in the documentation, but those are really helpful so that you don't have to do those and those make things dynamic and you look fancy and everyone's like, wow, you're the best. And then of course we wanted more spacing. So that's it. That's all you need to know about JSON, right? Everyone's an expert in JSON now and we can get moving. So let's take a look at some actual samples. That is just basically the end of the slides except for the wrap up, because I just like to look at actual things we can do here. So let me bring you guys over here and let's get started. So, all right. So everyone's got their classic Warrior Horses site, of course, right? Where we all go to coordinate our efforts in the battlefield in the various wars that the horses are taking part in, right? And the Warrior Horses, of course, manage their destruction and their chaos through SharePoint, as do we all. Right, so we've got a series of lists here on the site, and we're going to take a look at some formats with them. So I've got just a bunch of demos, and basically I'll just keep doing demos until Dimitri tells me to shut up, or someone else tells me to shut up. If there is something specific you're looking for, right, please just put it in the chat. I've got that over here so I can see it. We'll take a look at things like Power Apps integration, some Flow integration, some basic stuff, some much more advanced stuff. Again, if there's something you want to see, I'm happy to throw out a demo and add a new one in, okay? All right, so we'll start basic though, and we're just going to take a look at a design mode, right? So the idea here is Recruitment Tracker is one of those lists you can add when you go to add a new list. And when you do that, you get these choice fields. Oh, I'm getting a configuration. That's wonderful. Okay, so the idea here is when you add a choice column, right, you get these pills is what they're called. That's formatting. If you go to edit this column, right, it just looks like this now. and you can get this little thing. You can kind of set colors and say mindless grunts are dark green, or actually we'll say mindless grunts are just random color. And that's cool. That's actually formatting. You may not realize that's formatting because it's doing it for you, right? And you could say format this column, and this is how you get to that for everything. Just say format this column, and what we've got here is these choice pills. And you can hit edit styles, and you can see it's written like little conditional rules. And you say if the position is mindless grunt, make it look like that, right? And we can come over here and we could say more styles. We say, oh, make it bold. I don't know why we'd want to, but we could, right? The other thing you can do is I mentioned there's just a ton of icons. For whatever reason, Microsoft has decided, you know what, you need about 12. Why? These particular 12, I have no idea. But what we're going to do is we're just going to add an icon in here so we can customize it. Because this is something I do a lot, is I start with whatever Microsoft gives us. Maybe because I'm lazy, I don't know. But I don't want to have to do all of this myself. So in this case, I'm just going to add a thumbs up, right? And we'll say save on that. And you can actually see if we, I got to find a mindless grunt. There's mindless grunt. Wow, it's got a little thumb. Let me zoom this a little bit. There we go. And we'll make this bigger so we can see it. In fact, actually, you know what? I'm going to jump ahead just to show you something. I don't know if you're aware. When you're looking at this stuff, right? So if you're on a list, you can add query strings up here that make some of this stuff just a little bit easier to see. And I'm just going to go ahead and show you those. So if you add, and this is true on other sites, it's not just list. If you add env, that's for environment, right? You say equals, and these are case sensitive. If I say embedded, right here, you can see it actually takes away the header and everything. So now I've got a much bigger view here, which is much nicer for demoing and so on. Now embedded will show if you've got a hub site menu, that'll continue to show up. So if you don't want the hub site menu, you type in web view instead. It looks the exact same because I don't have a hub menu. But you can also, if you want to see this in Microsoft lists, instead of your website, you could say web view list. And then it's going to have that purple for Microsoft List. You're going to get your icons and so on, and it's going to look like it does on Microsoft List. So those are just a couple of quick tips to make some of this easier to see. Let's go back, and I'm going to go back to embedded just so we can see what we're doing a little easier. All right, there we go. So now we can see this list a little easier. And let's go back into what we're doing. All right. And format this column. So we go back into our edit styles, and I'm just going to add an icon to each of these quickly so I can show you what we're going to do with that. And again, you've got more style options, but I'm just going to add a thumbs up on pretty much all of these because that's a good time. And I'll show you why I'm doing that. Keep you in suspense. Whew. All right, come down here and we'll add one more. So then the idea here is, so again, I'm not writing into that fancy JSON stuff that I showed you. It wrote it for me. As a result, now I've got icons. But what if I want icons that are not thumbs or, you know, the other 11? Well, that's where I've got a website here called Flyken. So it's flyken.io. Let me grab that. I'll paste it in chat for anyone that wants it. Boom. There we go. And what this is it shows you all the icons, it kind of groups them because these you do have to do these by name. Kind of the classic one I like to show off is if you're looking for a cat, you type in cat, right? Wait, what did I do? There's cat, right? So the icon's name is cat. That makes sense, right? So if I want to use cat, I use cat. Now, if I wanted to use dog, well, guess what? Dog is called Fang Body, right? Boats are called ships, and all sorts of other things have really weird names sometimes, right? And they can be hard to find as a result. So if you come to this website, you can just copy that name, right? So if we wanted that icon as Fang Body, we could come back here to our site. And now I want to switch out those icons. So I'm going to format this column, but instead of going into my choice pills, I'm going to scroll a little further down. Ooh, advanced mode. Oh my gosh. Are you guys ready? Let's do it. Advanced mode. All that really means is we get this little window, which they keep making smaller by adding more things up here. But the idea is now I can see this is the JSON that was generated for me. It's overly complicated because Microsoft generated it, and it's also using an old style syntax. But we don't really care because we don't really care what it's doing. We like what it's doing. We just want the icon switched. But because this tiny little square is actually VS Code, I can hit Control F in this window, and I get a find. So I can search for that icon name. There it is. And now I can be like, what is it? So I could say, oh, mindless grunt is now it's the like icon. Not anymore. Now it's Fang Body. And if I preview that, let's come over here and we can see it. Now I've got the dog. Right. And I go through and I can find each one of the battlefield engineers and still the like, and we can type in, that's a drop, right? Like a blood drop. There we go. And we got that and so on. But the idea is you can take advantage of those icons without knowing any of this extra formatting stuff and just make things a little easier to use and make these make a lot more sense, right? It's a lot easier when you're scanning a list. You've got an icon, you've got a color, and people could just get to doing their jobs, right? The list, people aren't nearly as excited about SharePoint as you are, right? So what you could do is help them by making it so that when they come here, they're not spending all their time just reading lines of text and wishing their cubicle was their bed or whatever it is. And you make it just a little easier by adding pretty colors and icons. Wow. Okay. You know what? That's a great point that this is so small. So you can use Notepad or Notepad++ to write this code. Let me tell you what I use. Okay. So Catherine, I think that's an excellent point. I'm pulling that from chat for those that are in the room. I've got an extension installed here. So I'm using, this is the Edge. It's the Chromium Edge, but you can also do this in Chrome. And there's an extension available from Sergey Sergeev, who's an MVP. It's written one called SP Formatter. And when you turn this on, it's going to add this little button, right? So now I've got it enabled. And one of the things it does is this little button right here. And look at that. Now I can edit this code here, in a much larger window. Make much easier, but it's not part of the standard, so I don't often demo that way or show it. And the other thing you can do, and Dimitri's got a great point that VS Code works. And in fact, if you install SP Formatter here as an extension in your browser, but you also install it as an extension in VS Code, you can actually start a session. So if you've got these files in VS Code, that's your preferred environment. You want to use some of your other extensions, it will actually synchronize these. So as you're writing in VS Code in another window, it will continue to preview over here and update things automatically. Now, one of the greatest things about SP Formatter is I don't have to hit the preview button. You can see it's not even shown, right? So if I said customer support, right? Oh, that's still, let's go down to the icon names and we say, customer support is, where was the icon names? There they are. Customer support is still on like. Well, let's change that, right? Type in robot and we should see, it automatically did it. I didn't have to preview, right? So if I take it away, you can see it goes away. And that's really, really helpful. So SP Formatter is a tool I highly recommend if you're writing a lot of formats and you don't like to write it in 4 lines and scroll constantly. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and disable that for now so we can continue to take a look at things. That's kind of what I want to show you on that. That's design mode. There's a little more to it than that. There's different design mode wizards for like dates and all sorts of other things. And there's also kind of a conditional formatting, which we can take a look at here in just a moment. But let's take a look at something a little different, right? So let's come over here and let's go to, because I've done this now, I've removed my menus. There we go, get those back. And let's head over to the things list. So I've got this things list, right? And there's some lovely stuff in it, things and things, right? But this is, I've applied a format over here. And if we come over here and we go to column settings, we format this column. And I just remove it so we can see what it looks like without that format. All right, that's what it looks like. Let's turn off I'm going to turn that off because I don't want to confuse anyone later. And they're like, mine didn't do the thing. Okay, so let's turn that off for now. But the idea is now yes, no, right, have this little check or no check. And that's fine in a lot of scenarios. But sometimes you want to indicate like this is a task list. And I want it to look like a task list. All right, so this is a format that's available again on there. And I've applied a couple of extra things. Those are secrets for later. We'll get rid of those. Let's preview that. And I get this checkbox, right? And now you can't actually do anything with the checkbox yet, but again, we're going to come back to that in just a little bit here. But that's cool. That makes it more obvious that this is a task, that this is undone, and this is done, right? So it's not just yes or no, it's complete or not. Now we can come over here and let's save that. And let's come over here to our progress. We go to column settings as a percentage column. We go to format this column. We get this nice data bars one. Ooh, that's fancy. I mean, that's a huge improvement, right? Now it's not just a number that I have to read each one and kind of figure out. I can actually see visually what's going on. And that's all right, but we've got a bunch more samples available for you. So let's take a look at the sample site, which I haven't really shown you yet. So this is that aka.ms/list formatting, and that'll take you to this site. Now this site will tell you details on getting started. So I'm going very fast on purpose, but come over here and you can check out the getting started, also show where the documentation is and so on. But the main thing I like to use this for is that we have things grouped. Right, so we've got just straight up list of samples. If you're the kind of person that's like, man, I love to read lists, well, here you go, right? But if you want something with a little more context around them, like say you're looking for a column type, right? So in this case, we've got a number column. We come down here and we find number. I can expand that. And these are all the samples that are using numbers, right, that are meant to be used with numbers. So let's say I go down here, and the one I like to grab is this number gauge, right? So I click that. It's going to take me directly into GitHub. Here's the sample stuff. Here's a README about the details. I can see that this one just is applied to a percentage column, but some of these have a few different column view requirements and so on. You can read all that, and then all you have to do is click on the JSON file, and and you click this little copy button right here in GitHub. Whoop. And don't worry, if you're scared of GitHub, you don't have to be. You notice I'm not even signed in, right? You don't have to have an account to copy these things. I don't have to download anything. It's just a file repository. It's basically online folders with files in them, which sounds very similar. So I think you'll be able to handle, right, that. It's very SharePoint-ish, except scarier, if that's possible, right? But I can just copy that format, and when I come back over here, again, I go down to advanced, and I'm just going to, that's what it generated for those data bars. I'm going to Control-A to hide it, get rid of all of it, delete it. I'm going to paste the one I just got, preview that. Ooh, I've got a fancy gauge, right? And again, I'm getting big bonus this quarter, right, from my boss who thinks I wrote that because I copied and pasted. It's great. And if I wanted to, I could get in there and edit this. And this is a fairly advanced sample because it's basically making a dynamic SVG, which is something that you can do when you're getting some of those fancy things. All right, well, I appreciate all the links. That's awesome. Ooh, look at that. That's a good idea. So if you guys aren't a part of the meeting, you want to check that chat later, right? So William has just pasted a cool extension that allows things to be JSON when you're heading to that REST API, which is very, very helpful as well. Okay, so there we go. There's a progress bar. I'm going to save that. Now we're talking. Now, if I wanted to do something over here, I mentioned this idea that we've got a couple different rules, right? So this is just the title field. I'm going to do what's called conditional formatting. And this is where I don't have to write anything. I could say, give me some rules, right? So this is show all values as. So this is the default. I have no idea why the default is a gray block. I'm just say no styles, right? Just make it look the way I want it. I want to get in there and I say, bold it or something I could, right? Just like we had before. And we come back here, but then I can add a rule. In this case, I'm going to say if the column complete, that's my yes, no, column over here on the side. And if I'm saying if that complete is equal to yes, right? Then I want it to show it this way. In this case, I'm going to say more styles. And I'm going to say, yeah, I don't want any colors. I just want it to be, let's see, strike through, right? So boom, I can save that. And the idea here is I've just written a format without having to do anything. And now when this is checked, that'll be struck through, right? Now I mentioned the idea here that we could go a little further with this column. Let's go ahead and do that just so we can see what that looks like. And that code that I deleted, let me see if I can remember it. Yeah. So I'm going to add, the idea here is I'm going to come down here. So all this is doing is got an icon, right? It's got the class. It's conditionally showing that icon. So saying if the current field, so yes or no, that comes back to true or false. So if it's true, then do a checkbox composite, which is it's the box with the check in it. And if it's false, just show the checkbox without a check. Again, these names are lovely. Checkbox composite. Of course it's that, right? But again, use the Flycode website. It'll help you find those. Okay? But if I come down here and I want to make that a little further, I can type in something like a style, right? So I've got a style, and I could say I want the cursor, to be a pointer, because I'm going to make this interactive now. So I preview that. Now you can see now I get this cursor over it. It still doesn't do anything, but I can make it do something. This is where we're going to look at more first actions right here. So I'm going to say a custom row action. Oh, not custom card props. Let's get rid of that. Let's go custom row action. There it is. All right. And then, so the action I'm going to do here. So this is when you click on this, I want you to do something. So the action I'm going to say is set value. And then with set value, you have to provide an action input. And so action input just says, what field name do you want to set? In this case, I'm saying set the complete field, right, to a value. So when you click on this, I want to do something. Now, we know what it's set to, so we can actually write an expression. We can say if at current field, right, so that's that current value is, true or false, because that's true or false, then I want you to set it the opposites, right? So if it's true, set it false. And if it's false, set it true. That's all we're going to do. And we're going to preview that. Let's just save that. And now I come over here and I can actually check the box. Look at that. So let me hide this so we can see a little easier. You'll see as I say it's done, boom, the other formats are applied, the whole row is reevaluated, and so on. and you'll see up here, briefly, it's updating the list item. So now I've created an interactive checkbox, which is a lot more helpful in certain cases where you just want to be able to edit things very, very quickly, right? Now, if we look over here, we've got a couple other formats on this list we could take a look at. This one is called a face pile. So I have a multi-person, field here. And if we take a look at what that looks like without this fanciness, let's cut that and preview it. Let's actually make it so we can see it. Oh, look at that. So that's the default, right? It's just a list of names, and that's okay, right? Maybe you want the fancy faces though, because we have access to their picture information and so on. And again, you'll want to take a look at this sample. It's available. It's called face pile. And what it's going to do is going to load in their profile pictures, but it's also going to show a maximum of 3, right, with extras in the tooltip. And in fact, we're going a little further. And if you hover over a person field, well, let's save it and we'll refresh just to be certain. We should have our hover field. There it is. So we've actually still got the integration with the person card and so on. So you can see Dan Gump's information, and you can handle all of that with your formatting with a single line. So it's literally just default hover field. Try doing that in SPFX. All right. So that is one of the few advantages we have over SPFX, is that we can do a people card using the out of the box with no issue there. Okay. Now, I've mentioned icons a few times, right? As you might guess, I really like icons. Excuse me. But we can get kind of creative with them as well. Right, so you'll notice we have icons, and these are in color. All right, and the way we've done that is we've just gotten creative by coming in here, and let's see. So the idea, let's scoot it, yeah. All right, is we draw a heart, and then we draw another heart, and we're just using absolute positioning to position one icon on top of the other. That's it. That's all this sample is, and again, you can check that out. But again, we're just using the things we know about CSS to apply that, right? So we make it absolute, and we just position the other icon on top of it, and suddenly we have a nice icon by taking advantage of the fact that there are wireframe and solid icons available to you, and so on. And that's fine. You'll also notice that we have the same kind of thing going on over here. We've got the same thing where we've put a smiley with a circle, but then we've got these other icons that are dependent on a status field in the column, right? So we have a little small icon. Again, you get pretty creative with those icons to position those all over the place if you want. Or you could go a little easier, and that's what we're going to show next. So if we head over to our invasion progress, with the idea of using emojis, right? Now, this is one of those things that catches people off guard, because it's one of those things that seems obvious afterwards. But it's not always obvious in the moment. And the idea is emojis are just text. And so you can write them directly in your JSON format. All right. So I'm saying in this case, right, we're showing a progress or a phase, right? So we're indicating this is a phase 2, right? So it's on step 2 of 5. This just kind of gives us that visual indicator, and we're using emoji for it because we're cool and hip, like all the kids these days, right? And if I want to change out the emoji, right, to some other emoji, I can hit that Control F, just like we did before. And I can say, yeah, I don't like unicorns. All right, so every unicorn, I can hit this little icon, and now I can replace it. So let's pick a new icon. So if you're on a Windows machine, you can hit Windows period, and you get the emoji guy right here. So I could say, instead of unicorns, we're going to make it the little chick. That sounds exciting. All right, I'm just going to hit replace all. Boom. Did I do it? And let's preview that. Boom. So there you go. So I've downloaded that sample. I've made them the icons I want using emojis. I didn't have to do any fancy icon positioning, and there we go. So that's a cool way to use emojis. And if we take a look over here at this one, this is a choice column, right? So and I want to take a look at this to illustrate some of the things that this particular sample solves, right? So if we, whoop, so you can see it, you'll notice, right? So it's just a choice column, and so the techniques that people have chosen in the invasion, right? They got exploding and robots, and this one's got stabbing and exploding, right? And this one has stabbing and seduction and so on, right? All these different ways, and that's okay. One of the things you may not realize is with a multi-choice field is that these are shown in the order they are clicked on, right? So if I'm got this list of these, right, and I choose robots first and then exploding, it's going to be robots then exploding. And what that means is on a big list like this, that is hard to scan. Right, so if you're looking for a way to really just see how things are going, we've got this sample that's available, and what it does, and again, you can replace these emojis with whatever you want, is it makes it basically a table format within your column. And so I can quickly scan and see, hey, who's done robots, right? no matter what order they checked them in or did anything like that, I can quickly see exactly what's going on. And again, you could use those icons for it. And we have another sample that uses the icons rather than the emojis. But that's a great way to handle those multi-choice columns when you're really trying to make things easier for people. Again, make it easy to read your list. People will be a lot happier, and you'll have a lot less support tickets in the end. Okay, so let's move on from this guy and take a look at some more. Is everyone following along? Everybody good still?
Yeah, nice.
All right, good. Okay, so let's jump into some other stuff here. Oh, wait, real quick, I forgot I want to show the additional row class. Let's go back to things because that's an easier one to show it on. But the idea of an additional row class is we format the current view, right? So you can apply alternate row styles. If you wanted, you can do the same kind of rules for these things, right? So you can make your rows show up certain ways, or you can also just up in advanced mode, which is not surprisingly what we're going to do here. And we're going to jump over here. And the idea here is I just type in additional row class, and now I can get one of those classes that are magic, words that we can find from SharePoint, and I can apply those. Now, where do I find what those classes are? Right? Like I showed that SP severity, like what the heck was that about, right? Well, the good news is if we go back to this website, these groupings, we also have these by class down here. So if you're coming here by class, you can see like if I wanted a background, I can see there's a bunch of these different ones, right? The SP CSS background color. So those are all those fancy ones you see in those squares. These are those names. They're all listed here. And again, you can see samples that are using them. But I just use this so I can see what ones are available because we show, even if we don't have a sample on it, we're showing you every available class of that type. So there's a bunch of different background classes here. We've got border classes as well. So if you wanted like a dotted line around your classes, you could. Text sizes, as well as text colors and then things about borders and so on. But there's actually also some animation classes and some very specific classes for formatting, like those SP field, like the severity classes we took a look at before, like the severe warning and so on, if you wanted those. So take a look at these when you're trying to find out what those classes are. In this case, I happen to know them, so I'm just going to type one in, right? So we're going to say MSBG color red. Now, why would we do that? Wow, now everything's red. Everyone's so happy I did that, right? Maybe not, but we can make this conditional, right? And that's when it becomes more helpful. So if we wanted to say, in this case, I'm just going to paste it for time purposes. I'll type it for you, and then we'll explain what it does. And so you can also write an expression. So anytime you want to write an expression, just start it with equals, okay? So there we go. So now I'm saying, since I was a multi-person, I'm going to look inside it and say, hey, look in the list of emails in that assigned to field. And if you happen to find me, right, which means that the value of index of is -1 means it wasn't found, and 0 above is the position it is in that list, then I want you to show it as red, right? So let's preview that. And now only the ones that I'm assigned to are red. And if Dan Gump comes in here, only his will be red to him, right? So it's completely dynamic. Again, maybe don't choose red as that's pretty terrible. We could say, theme primary instead, and it will match whatever beautiful theme color, in most cases brown, because we all have brown sites, of course, right? But, if you've picked a different theme or whatever, if you're picking these theme-based classes, your styles will work regardless of what people choose, even if they choose that same bumblebee theme, right? That dark black with yellow. You can still work with all of those using these theme colors and the neutral colors that will work there. Okay. All right. But let's not leave that because nobody wants a bunch of brown rows. Okay. So now let's jump over and let's take a look at a couple other things here. Before we get too far, I want to call out that there are other view types. And let's take a look at like a calendar view. So if I go to resolutions, right? So it was just recently January. The horses themselves, of course, are tracking all of their resolutions here in the list. And this is okay, right? But they wanted to assign due dates to them. So, but that's all right here, but we've got this idea now of a calendar view, right? So I've applied a calendar here. And look, now we have a calendar. Let's make that a little bigger. So now those things are on a calendar, and that's cool. By default, though, they're all going to be ugly. And so you'll notice that they are not ugly. And if I format that current view, it's because I've done something with this additional event class. And I just have an expression that's looking at the status. And I say, if the status is done, make it green light. Else, we just keep nesting these if statements, nested all the way down, right? And then we say if it's working on it, then it's blue light and so on. And the idea here is we can build this additional event class so we can, have these as the status, or these are, certain events, or maybe we want to mark holidays or whatever we want to do on our calendar. That's pretty much the only formatting we could do on this calendar. But it's a really powerful view to have. I will say, I noticed this week. What is that? Right? Doesn't actually change anything right now. I think they've accidentally leaked the next iteration of this. So there you go. I did not leak that to you. I'm just showing you something that's in the interface. So there you go. All right. But that's a pretty cool way to do that. One caveat with this, I will say, is sometimes you go to do this and it just won't work. And you're like, what the heck? And the reason for that is when you go to format or edit the current view, you get this instead of that classic like everywhere else. And what will happen is sometimes when you switch these around, it'll actually change the definition of the view. And then your columns are no longer a part of that. And you cannot reference a column that is not part of the view. So the status column, even though we're not showing it, has to be part of this view. And if you run into that situation, go to your classic list settings. And I know we all love to see it, but you can come in here to your view, right? And you can check the box on those as well, okay? All right, that's just something to keep in mind when that inevitably comes up. All right, so there you go. Now let's jump into something a little more advanced, a little more fun, all right? So we mentioned this idea of a set value. There are other actions you can do. All right, so we have this idea of default actions, which just opens it, right? So maybe you wanted to replace the title field or you wanted to not have that double click. Edit action, all it's going to do is open it in the edit mode, right? So it's as if you'd opened it and then hit edit all. We have a share button, which is where you take whatever one you're on instead of having to select it and then come up here and hitting share. That's so much work, right? You can instead say share, and it's just going to do the exact same thing as that. So it brings up the share box. You can also have a delete, and it's just going to confirm that. And then the most interesting one of all is the flow action, right? So the flow action is you can launch a flow panel and it will do things automatically in the list. And now what I want to do is I want to jump over to a different list because I think it's a little more exciting to see it somewhere else that's horse themed, of course. And so the horses have this idea of battle plans, right? So the horses have, they've got their own bureaucracy as everyone else, right? They're out on the battlefield and they're saying, this is what I want to do. But they've got to go through a multi-stage approval. Of course they do. Everything has to be approved in SharePoint, right? So we got this idea, and you may have come in here and you're seeing something like this, and you say, boom, and you've attached a flow. You come up here to the automate guy, and you can see I have this battle plan approval, right? And I can click that, and it's going to open up this flow panel eventually, right? And if you're an end user, right, and you've told them, hey, when your list item gets to this point, make sure you select it, because if you don't select it, you're not going to see it up here. It's going to be gone, right? So you have to select the item, and then you're going to have to come up here, and you're going to have to say automate. Then you're going to have to find it, and it doesn't always show up for a few seconds. And once you find it, it's going to say run flow, right? And they're like, I don't know what a flow is. What am I doing, right? And they're going to be scared, and they're going to cry, and then you're going to get lots and lots of ServiceNow tickets, right? So save yourself some complication, right? Make a button that says request, right? So this is approval, and I'm saying request. And when I click that, using formatting, I could come up here, and not only does it open up the flow panel, I can customize what it says. I could customize, instead of saying run flow, this is particularly helpful, kill, 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 right? But maybe you're saying like submit for approval, right? Or something along those lines. It's still showing the descriptions of things from flow. It's still going to have the flow confirmation. So it's not bypassing any of the security and other things that you're used to. But what it's going to do is make things make sense for end users, prompt them, give them, what you need, right? So now the button says, nay, right? And that's pretty cool. And in fact, if I start that, it's going to start that flow for that item. You notice I didn't have to select it because I picked it directly, right? It goes ahead and starts the flow. And then as that flow happens, you'll notice I didn't do anything. The list item, the flow updated the list item in the background, and it automatically updated here. And when it did, this format changed. And you'll notice I no longer have a button here, right? So I can conditionally show that button based on the status. I know that if it's pending gate 1, well, they don't need to request that again, right? And in fact, if they do, that's just going to, put more things for the poor executive assistant that's approving things on behalf of someone else, right? So now instead, what I can do is I can say, oh, I know a flow is going, so why don't I take that status and show it in this panel, right? So I have a custom hover card here, and then I've got this here. Now I made this beautiful chart. Oh my gosh, so beautiful in Visio. And when I made it in Visio, Visio has an option to save as SVG. So I saved it as a scalable vector graphic. That's what SVG is. And then formatting has support for putting in SVGs. And so then you can throw that. And if we take a look at that, column settings and format this column, it's going to look a little nuts, and that's okay. Because I didn't have to make it. I'll show you how I got it. So if I scroll way down, there it is, SVG, you start to see all this stuff, right? And it's showing the paths and so on, but I can show the fills as green or red, or I could show them conditionally, right? So if it's pending gate 1, make it yellow, otherwise gray, right? So that's that first kind of piece there. There, you see that here? So I could say it's gray, or if it's yellow based on where it is. So if that status changes, then we're good. For instance, I can change this. I'm going to skip as if it were through the flow because I did that as my sweet demo, right? And I come over here, and if we come over that, now it's on gate 3. So in other words, we made a dynamic SVG using Visio. And then we used another tool, which I'll show you in just a moment, that helps make that into that format syntax that looks like this, because that's not SVG syntax. SVGs are written as XML. And then we take them, we put them in here, and that's very cool, blah, 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 and fanciness, right? So let's take a look at that, and then we're going to come back to what else is in this format, and also what the heck did I just do there, right? And so the first thing I want to do is show you this other tool. So if we're back on our site here, if we go under Tools, we have this HTML deformatter. So if you're more comfortable in HTML, again, by the way, how am I doing on time, Dimitri?
Doing great.
Okay. Again, I'm just going to keep going until we're done. But the idea here is HTML deformatter. If you're more comfortable with HTML and you want to see what it looks like as a format, you can just paste that here. So if you've got like an SVG file, say, and this would be a little weird because you can just get these icons, but you can export these on the Flycon website and it will save them as an SVG. And if you want to set their colors beforehand, you could pick that theme, right? Like we'll pick purple because that's so pretty, right? And we'll save that. It's purple. Oh, I didn't change the axis, the hover on that one. And we can say the icon options, right, is down here. And I'm going to say the icon should be the theme primary, or we'll just say it's orange lighter. That's great. Okay. The idea here is you can set all that, and then I can export that and save as SVG. There's my Fang Body SVG. And if I open up that folder, we'll see what have I been downloading. Oh my. All right, and we'll open that with code or Notepad or whatever. And the idea here is when we do that, we can see SVGs are just a bunch of text, right? And what we can do is we can just copy all of that. I don't care what it is. And maybe you've got this SVG off of Font Awesome, or you've got it up a Noun project, or who knows where else, right? Or your design team's come up with an SVG. Just take that SVG, head over to this HTML deformatter, paste it in as HTML because SVGs count as HTML. And then you can hit this run. And what that's going to do is it's going to, you'll notice it's made this element type of SVG, and it's broken everything down, all these individual path elements. In this case, it's just got the one, but it's gone ahead and written that as a format. And then you can just cut and paste this in. And you don't have to do all the manual translation of SVGs, because again, this one's a fairly simple one, but some SVGs are nuts inside, right? So you can grab those. I will say this is, if you've got SVGs that have like groups and they've got other types of circles and shapes, what you're going to want to do is open it with a tool called Inkscape. So Inkscape is an open source SVG editor. It's free. It's great. And one of the things it has is you can save as. And when you save as, you can save it as a simplified SVG. And what it'll do is it'll collapse all of those groups and everything else just to make it into a series of paths that'll work nicely with this. Okay, so let's move on. But that's how you could do some of those things. Like, and again, that is literally what I did. I made this beautiful thing in Visio in, about 5 minutes, as you could tell. And then I just pasted in there, and then I pasted in here, and I figured out with paths the fill color I needed to set dynamically. Okay, so perfect. Got a link to Inkscape in there. Awesome. And then the other thing I've done is I'm conditionally showing that action or not. Now, the last thing, and it's not really formatting, but it's something I like to show because this is, I cannot stand this right here. So if I've got this flow, right, and say I've run this about 1 billion times and not just earlier today, right, what is this with, right? Like we used to have way back in on-premises days, right, if you got workflows, right, you could go to a list item and see all the workflows for that list item, and you didn't have to go search those. When a user said, oh, about a week ago, it didn't work, and you have to go investigate that, and you're like, a week ago, there's been 100 flows since then. And then you spend 4 hours of your day clicking on each flow and looking, was it this the one? Was this the one? And so on, right? So I don't know why Microsoft hasn't changed that, but we can work around it. And the way we work around that is this column is actually a text column. And what I'm doing is I'm storing a link inside of it. And the reason I'm storing that is, you'll notice this flow run details, right? So if I click that, it'll actually open up the exact instance of that flow for me, right? So I can see it directly from the list item. I can open up that flow instance and see what we started and so on, right? So for that selected item, and here it is, I can get all my details about it, and that's pretty cool. And the way I did that, and I do this on every flow I do, whether I write it back to the list item, if it's, every list item, every flow that is working with list items and so on, either I write it to that or I write it to a separate list. What I do, and I'll show you this in the end on a slide where it's easier to see, is there's a formula for flow URL. And it's the same every time. And basically, I just save this variable as a flow URL. And then the first thing I do is I go update the item, or I update a list, create a new item in another list. That's my log list for admins, where I provide a little bit of details about that item, right? And then I just save the flow URL. And then with formatting, I can turn that into a link as needed. So again, I will show you that formula in a way that you can actually see it, because that is really helpful right there, and it's always in a tooltip, isn't it? But that's really helpful, right? Again, make things easier, not just for the end users, but for yourself, right? Formatting can really help you with all of those things. All right, so now let's come back over here and let's take a look at one other thing I want to do on this list. Oh wait, actually, before we do the thing, I want to explain what I did here, right? So if we go to column settings and format this column, you could take any format, and at the very end, you're going to slap a magic thing on it. Let's see if I've got it on the very end. Ooh, let's scroll it down. And that's this. So anywhere the format, so take any of those samples we did, and you're just going to slap inline edit field, and you're going to say current field. That's it. And when I do that, that means when I hover over it, I can now edit this field right here inline, and I can, well, not when I'm previewing apparently. I don't know why it's doing that, but if we grab this, like, let's just grab this magic thing, right? And let's go to, say, our things list again. And we wanted to we wanted to be able to update the title, right? So column settings, format this column. We'll go to assign to column settings. Why don't I have format this column anymore? If I've done something, I'm going to just refresh. What have I done? I don't know. That was fun. All right. So if we wanted to format this column, all right, let's not do it on the people field. Let's do it on the sentiment settings. I'll tell you, I'll put on the title after all. Column settings, format this column, advanced mode, right? We had this whole thing. Again, I don't really care what's in here. It was all generated for me. Just at the very end, I'm going to hit a comma, paste that inline edit field, current field, preview. And now I can say project kickoff, right? And hit enter, and there it's saved, right? So now I get my inline editing, boom, just like that. So that's a very fancy way, again, to make certain fields. Now, there are some difficulties with, certain field types, more complicated ones, but it's going to work really well with choice columns, it's going to work with people columns, it's going to work with lookups and numbers, and basically all of the, the standard column types you would expect. I don't believe it works with location fields, for instance. But that is really, really helpful for when you're saying certain fields should just be a checkbox. It should be a really quick thing, right? Especially status fields. I use that a lot, right? I don't want to open a whole form for that. Okay, now let's go back to our battle plans, because I wanted to show another kind of advanced thing here, right? So I mentioned this idea that we're avoiding having to make people click this and come up here to automate and battle plan approval, right? We don't want them to do that. In fact, we don't want this at all, right? So let's get rid of it. So that's where we're going to go to all items. We're going to format the current view. I'm going to go advanced mode. And what we're going to do is we can edit these command bar props, command bar. So let's just see command bar props. And what these are is it's like this. And you say commands. When you do that, it's going to be an array of commands. And so you're going to say key is the important one. So key. Now, this is a list of these keys exist in the documentation. So if you head over to aka.ms/spdocs-column-formatting. Very handy link. You can also just literally search for column formatting documentation, and those will show up. This is where you're going to find all of this information. And if you expand view formatting over here, command bar customization is here, and it will list all of these keys. Now, it's up to you to figure out which one exists, but you could just trial and error it, right? So, for instance, I want to get the new button just so we can mess with that a little bit, because that's an obvious one. So if I say the key is new, Now I can do something like hide. Hide is true. I preview that. Goodbye, new button. Now, does that really make it so they can't add new items? No, because there's other ways they can do things, right? But, and it's not permissions, right? We're not doing the permissions. It's really just removing it from the user interface. But by doing that, again, we can remove the noise and the clutter that scare people with SharePoint. Like maybe if we're saying like this is an internal list, no one should ever share this, right? Well, get rid of the share button, right? Or do something a little better. So say this is a list about, let's use our Fang body again, dogs, right? So we could say icon name. We can actually replace it. So we could say Fang body with those same list of icons. Let me say preview. And now instead of that plus button, I got a little doggy. Wow. Right. But again, I'm just making it a little easier to understand, a little bit easier to see. I can make these other ones have the border like this one has. I can change the order of things and I can hide stuff. I can also hide stuff conditionally, right? So if we come up here and I say, I don't want that automate menu, right? I'm going to say hide is true. It's true, right? And boom, it's gone. But there is part of a problem there, right? Like, well, what if I wanted the rules? Like, I still want automate sometimes. I'm just trying to get rid of, the list of other things. Well, I can actually say here, I could say selection modes. Is that right? Let me make sure for my notes. Yeah, selection modes, right? And then with selection modes, you can say, what does this apply to? In this case, we're going to say single selection. So if you've got a single item selected, I want you to hide this. So if I preview that, we got an automate button back until I click it. And now I don't have that anymore. So now they can't even confuse themselves by launching extra flows. Or if I've got, 8 different flows based on the status, they're only showed exactly when I want them to by conditionally formatting this button over here. Okay. And I just realized we never actually looked at the format. So let's look briefly at that format, just that portion, just so we can see what that looks like. And that would be in the, what is that? Flow. Yeah, execute flow is the action. And this part, this kills me a little bit. You're going to write JSON inside JSON, and that JSON has to be escaped as a single string of JSON inside your JSON. Everyone got that? Perfect. Again, one of those wonderful decisions. But when you're looking at this, that's really, you're just writing JSON properties as a single string. So every time you have to write a double quote, you have to put a little, whatever that slash is. Is that forward slash, backward slash? I forget them. I always get them wrong. The one that goes left. Okay. And then you're going to put basically your flow ID. That's that horrible GUID, and you can get that off the details page of the flow. And then and that's all you really need. But if you want to also change the header text or the run flow button text, you can change those. And again, that documentation site has all of this information as well. You don't have to write all that down right now. Okay. All right. So let's keep going. All right. So what's that?
We have one question in the chat.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, can you hide or add to the item menu? So are you talking about this guy, the context menu? I'm going to assume. And things are affected here, but no, it's not quite complete. The other thing it doesn't do, so if you're doing like a list view command set, so if you have a SharePoint framework list view command set, those are completely they're not supported here. In fact, I asked the list team about that, and they said, what are list view command sets? And again, I wept. So if you're kind of doing some of those things, there are limitations to these things. But again, it's a huge improvement of what we've had in the past. And again, it's not the same as going into settings, right? Like if you don't want them to do the quick edit or edit grid view, go turn that off in settings, right? You could hide the button or you could hide it conditionally, but that's not the best way to do that because again, people can get that because that is a view setting. All they have to do is create a new view and suddenly they've got those buttons back. So use this less as a way to lock things down and more of a way to guide users and clear up noise and clutter, okay? I hope I answered your question, Patrick. If not, just ask a different version in the chat. It'll be great. Okay. So let's come over here and let's take a look at a couple other items here. Let's see, what have I not shown off here? All right, we've got some other things. Oh, we haven't looked at any kind of link to Power Apps. So let's do that. So let's come over here and let's take a look at how we can make Power Apps work a little easier with things, right? So if we go to, is it battles? Yeah, battle sounds right. Yep. So I've got this idea of a master list, right? It's my battles list here, and it's just a list of battles. And then I've got this button here that will email the commander, and what it does is it's going to, I apparently haven't synced Yeah, we'll do Outlook. That sounds great. Right, but this is a mail to link, and it just says, "Dear Chris Kent, please assist me with details on the Great Rabbit Purge of '93." Right, and that's exciting. No, I don't want to save that. But the way we did that is a format. So if we look at that, we've got, it's just building a link. We're literally building a mail to, and we're pulling in, we want to mail it to whoever the email is, who's the commander for this field, right? Maybe we wanted to do the created by, we can do the author. And then I'm just building out the subject and the body and so on, right? So I'm just generating an email automatically for the list item. I could have also generated a flow that did that, right? If I wanted to get a little fancier. And that's cool. But the other thing is, this is a Power App backed list, right? So I've got this, I've got a details list called spoils, right? So the spoils of the battle are here, right? And they've got a lookup column over there. And there is a Power App that we've put together right here. It's a very exciting Power App. And you come in here to this Power App with my beautiful design skills, right? It's just pulling in those battles, and then it's pulling up those related list items from the spoils list. And that's cool. But one of the things you'll find comes up a lot is that people are like, well, that's great, but what if I'm an admin and I'm working in the list, right? Because we've chosen not to use Dataverse or whatever else because, well, money, but also because SharePoint provides our backend, we'll say, right? And we've got these cool formats, but we want those more tightly integrated. So what you could do is inside your Power App. Oh, did I know? Yes, I did. Okay. Is in your Power App, you have this idea of a start screen, right? So you could say, what start screen do I actually want to go to? And in this case, we're going to look at a query string parameter. We're going to say item ID, right? So we're saying if item ID is there and it's a number, then I want you to go directly to the details screen. Otherwise, go to the first screen, which is the battle screen, right? And then the other thing we're doing is on start, we're doing the exact same check, and we're just setting our battle item. Instead of having our secondary item look back at what the selected item of this gallery is, we've just got it as a global variable called battle item, and we're just looking it up from that list based on the ID that gets passed in. Again, I'm going quick. This is a Power Apps class, but that's kind of how you do that. If you look up Power Apps deep linking, the official documentation outlines this as well. But the idea is now I can specify, if I go into my Power App and I put an item ID on the end, I can go directly to that item. Well, good news. Why don't we make that easier for people directly in that list? So if we go back to that battles list, we go here, we can see that we have that. So first, let's see, Siege of Stapleton, right? I can launch that. And if you look really tiny up here, it says item ID equals 2, right? So that's list item right there. And look, it went directly to it. I changed the color earlier because I hated this color. Oops, it's not published. But the idea here is it goes directly to it and so on, right? That's pretty cool. And the way we did that is very similar to that mail to. All we did was I went and I grabbed this thing out of the share, right? And then I added this hide nav bar equals true, because just always do that, because otherwise you get that stupid Power Apps bar at the top. And then I said item ID equals, and I'm referencing the literal ID column from the SharePoint list, because I know that's how I'm going to work with it in the Power App. Now you could do all sorts of things with that, right? Maybe you're passing in other information, right? You want to launch a separate Power App that processes something, right? Well, do that, pass those in as query strings, and then your Power App can take that context directly from your format and do stuff with it. And that's cool, right? So that's a nice tight integration that you can work with. And if you want to make some of these buttons and do all those things, almost everything you could do here, you could do it Power App. And so that's a really nice way. There's a few other integrations you can do, but that's kind of the primary one where you're trying to link those things over. Sometimes you might also want to, if you're not actually doing a Power App form, because it would be horrible if you did, right? You could customize this and just get rid of all these fields and so on if they're not required. In fact, we haven't really looked at that. Let's go to another list to look at the form stuff. Let's back to our things list, because I just like that list. If we come over to our things list, we can edit this form, right? So you can see I've already got some things here. You'll notice that those column formats are showing up, even the one where I changed it here. Those show up, they're still editable without having to do that edit thing. And what's happened here is I've configured the layout. And so I've got a header. You'll notice that this is not near as nice. It's not the VS Code editor for whatever reason. So write this somewhere else and then paste it in. But you'll notice it's using that same status logic we did before, picking colors. And I'm just doing it. So basically the status field, which we didn't really show, changes the header color, right? So I can have that dynamically change based on that, which could be a really nice way to indicate those items, right? Like if you've got a problem, well, show it red, right? Like make the header red, boom. And of course you can come down here to your footer, and that way people don't forget the current year. Very important, so they know that all the time. And you have your copyright statement, so nobody gets any big ideas here, right? You can do that here. And that's all we've done is we've done a get year on now, so that we always are up to date, so I don't have to log in here at midnight on January 1st, right? Okay. Now, I mentioned the idea of the body is not formatting. It looks like this. Again, consult this syntax. Otherwise, one thing to call out is you're not specifying any real format. You're saying sections in this case, right? I'm saying I just want title up on its own, so I didn't give it a display name for a section. And then I can come down here and I can say the section is details, and these are the fields I want. The most annoying thing possible is that these, again, in their infinite wisdom, are the display name of the field. Unlike everywhere else in SharePoint, it is where it's the internal name. You have to specify these with the display name. So again, you could weep, but that's what that's for, and it just kind of positions these things. I'll also caution you that attachments doesn't play nice. It likes to be at the end of the section regardless. I don't know why you want to put it at the front of the section, but if you try to, it's going to be like, yeah, I don't want to. Okay. Now, the other thing you could do here is edit the columns. All right, so you can't do anything with the required columns, but let's say, I only want to show the sentiment column, or let's do, I only want to show the status for some reason when complete is true, right? So I can actually write these, and this is the same kind of syntax. So I'm going to write an equals, right? And I could say equals complete, right? Now I can write that as an if statement, but I know that's a yes, no column. So I'm going to say yes. So now status you'll see is not there because it's not complete. Let's just save that. But as soon as I mark it as complete, it didn't work. So we'll have to check that formula. But the idea here is, let's see, what did I do in that formula? Let's try that again. Let's just put an if complete, right? True, otherwise false, and we'll just do it that way. Okay, and let's see if it liked that any better. Nope. All right, let's see. Oh, there it is. I think I just did it backwards. Yep, I did it backwards. Okay. All right, so you could do that. The other thing you could do is if you just want to remove something, this is something I do fairly often, right? So if you just go to your edit columns and you're like, yeah, just don't show this column, right? Like I can uncheck it, but then I can't reference it, right, in another section here because it's not a part of the form anymore. So what I can do is I can put a conditional formula and I can just say equals false. And by doing that, it won't show up anymore, but it is actually being retrieved by SharePoint, which means that I can then use it in my header and footer formats. Okay, and you cannot change the text of attachments with formatting. In fact, I'm not sure if you can do it anywhere else. Okay, and is there a way to set a fixed width on a column in the form? No, there's not. This does wrapping automatically. It makes it bigger. I think it's like 3 by default, and that drives me nuts. I absolutely wish we could do, the same as like HTML tables. We could do that call span. Like, what if I wanted this column to be, 3 columns versus the other ones that are all 1? Unfortunately, that's not available right now, but that is something that I definitely want. Okay. And yes, that's true. If you don't want attachments, you can definitely disable that in your settings, right? And not just have to hide it here. Okay, but that's form formatting. There's not a whole lot more to it than that. There are some difficulties if you're using lookup fields, but I've got a series of videos on that if you're doing that. And let's come back here. And how am I doing on time? Because I've got a couple more demos here.
Say another 10 minutes or so.
What? How much? 10?
Yep, 10 if that works.
All right, that works. Okay, so let's just do a couple more demos, and then we'll jump over to look at a couple other things here. So let's see. Let's take a look at a miniature application type thing, or actually let's take a look at the editing stuff a little more. Like if we go to our hit list. Oh, wait, before I do that, I want to show you the idea of a full view format. All right, so this is a full view format where I'm controlling everything, right? And it's a little bit, I zoomed it, but the idea here is I have replaced everything, right? The header's gone, it doesn't even look like a list anymore, right? But these are actual rows, and this is a view format. And, I've even got these buttons, right? So we've got the deletion and stuff in here, right? It looks like this very scary thing, and then I could place this on a web page as a web part, and nobody even knows this is a list, and that's pretty awesome, right? And we can go a little further with that. In fact, here's another one that I actually use this all the time. because it comes up all the time, right? Sue Hanley will tell you if you're writing frequently asked questions, that your website's probably just bad. And I just accept that my website's bad, and I'm going to have to put some FAQs, right? So the idea is it should be discoverable enough not to have these, right? If you've got these FAQs, right, and maybe you've got these as, what did I say, standard grouping, right? So now I've gone through, I've got an answer and I've got a question and I've done this thing, right? Ooh, it's almost like a little application, right? I've got my answer here and I've got my question, and that's kind of cool, right? I can say, can I have a hug? No, right? And so on. That's awesome, but here's the thing that's going to annoy you, and it annoys me certainly, is if I'm only ever going to have one, I don't want the count of that right there. Like, that's just stupid, right? That looks like I tried to save the file twice, right? Or, I don't need it to say question even, right? Why don't I get rid of that? So we can do things like that with this. So this is that same list, right? It's using that same collapse and stuff. We've hidden the header, and now we just have this right here. So it just says FAQs, and it looks like that. Now we could take that away, by the way, if we wanted to take that away. I just didn't. But if we come in here, the idea is we apply these group props, and then we get to apply a header formatter, and that's just whatever's here. And I'm just saying the field data means all I want you to say for the text is whatever the value of the column is. Don't give me all that other junk. But if I wanted to get the count, I could. So group has a couple other properties like the count and the field name, and so on. And then all I'm really doing is saying, make it a little bit bigger. That's what these do. Make it look big. And that's it. And then I'm also applying, a hover class so it looks a little nicer. And again, this is a sample that's available to you. If you're building something like this is a great way to do it. Drop it in a web part on a page, and people won't even know it's a list. You've just got a nice FAQs all set up. You can even add like a cool icon or something else if you wanted to add like a category for your questions. You can get fancy with it without it looking like a list. Go ahead.
Quick question, because we ran into this exact scenario. But the person who had created it had created an answer as a multiple lines of text and had included images inside of it. And it was making it so it was impossible to actually display the whole thing.
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. So you're talking about there is a definite limitation. So if we come in here, and I'm just going to add one here. So multiple lines of text, right? And we come up here and we say, this is a rich text, right? So it's enhanced rich text. So it's got all the fancy stuff in it, and we'll call it fancy, right? And we save that. And that seems really cool. And you're like, oh, awesome. Oh, let's not do that. Where'd my fancy go? Don't you love how this covers up what you want to do sometimes? Okay. All right. And so I open up this list item, right? I go to fancy down here, right? I get this pencil, and I could do all sorts of stuff. I could say, wow, wee, right? And I could I could add more. And this seems really, really cool. And I even like come in here, and I'm going to just put colors. And like you're saying, you can put images, you can put links, all sorts of stuff. I did all of that just to deliver sad news to you. And that sad news is that as soon as I try to apply formatting to this, right? And if I just, all I'm going to say is Elm type of div, and then I'm going to say text content, right? This is the most basic format you could have, is that current field. If I preview that, what we're going to see is, oh gosh, right? Yep. Yeah, that's exactly what's going to happen. So multi-line text fields are supported, but not when they've got rich. Because what's happening is it comes back as this HTML, and then SharePoint is literally escaping all of that for you when you try and use it in this value. And so what it's doing is it's making it so it doesn't actually generate HTML. If you looked at the HTML of this, it's generating escaped text that's then coming out this way. And right now there is no way around that. Okay. So that's the sad news. It's something I really wish we had. I will say we've done some work, and there's a sample actually related to FAQs where we've got a series of keywords that then could become links, almost like a syntax kind of thing. It's okay. So you can work with some of that, but yeah, if you're trying to do anything with like inline images and other stuff, you're going to be in a little bit of trouble with that, and it's just not going to work very well. Now, I will say, if we're not applying this format, let's try to think. Yeah, so if we are doing let's do this. Let's get rid of that. Let's try it. I think what we can do here, if we go to our format, the view, and we say add a formatter, I don't think it's going to let us do it. I'm just going to say, is it going to let us just put if we wanted to put the other column in here, I think it would work if we don't hide the column header. Let's take that. Let's say lies. Let's preview that just so we can add the column here. All right, so I've got that expanded. Let's go show hide columns, and let's add our fancy column. Let's apply that. All right, so now we've got our fancy column. And let's see, I don't remember which one I added a value. Was it in this one? All right, so we should have, where did I add that? It would have been nice to pay attention. Whoop, whoop. We'll just expand them all. This will be fun. What a fun game. There it is. So because we're not actually applying a format, right, we're only applying it to the group header, we could still have that, right? So we could have that here. We don't need that header up here. Basically, instead of our answer field could be rich text, we could not use any kind of formatting with it. But in other words, we could expand this and have applied the same kind of thing and have it work that way. So
Yeah,
I hope that helps a little bit.
where it went beyond the preview window, so they had to click the little button to open it up.
Oh yes, this is very
That
annoying.
made it ugly.
Yeah. So this is one of those things, and Microsoft keeps randomly adding something like this, right? So when it gets too long, they'll add something like this. And so for a while they were doing it, and it used to like a multi-text field would kind of go down like 3 lines, and then it would have that fade on it, right? Which was really irritating. In fact, there's a sample that just removes that and just shows that text. But again, anytime you're doing a format with a rich text, you're just going to cry. Okay, so I'm going to switch back to this. Yeah, go ahead. It's the time.
Quick thing on that.
Yeah.
Is there a chance that you could display that rich text in an on hover card, or would that be enough to break the render?
That'll be enough to break it as well.
Okay.
So unfortunately, the hover card is also just formatting. So again, I think I mentioned at the beginning, we're writing HTML in one of the hardest ways possible.
Yeah.
And so if you're trying to use the HTML inside the JSON like that, it's going to escape all that for you, and there's no workaround currently for that. I would love to see like React and other things, or Angular has these things of like, what do you call it? They call it like unsafe HTML. Like the idea is like, we'll just take it and we'll render it as HTML. And I would love to see them add that to this. It doesn't seem likely. And that's one of those areas where you're gonna have to jump over to SPFX, or you're gonna have to use a column, or what do you call those in the SPFX, the extension for form customizers, field customizer. So if you do a field customizer, you can do everything we're doing with column formatting, but you have full control JavaScript wise. And I would say, again, 99% of the time, what you're being asked to do, you can solve with column formatting or, view format or some combination of that. But there are definite points where you just can't do it, right? You want certain types of interactivity, or you want to be pulling data in from a, external service that isn't just as a URL. You're going to have to jump into that more advanced development scenario. And the other side of that is now I'm going to have a lot more than just design level permissions. So that's the other thing we haven't really mentioned. And if you noticed, I haven't deployed anything, right? I'm doing this here as I'm an owner of this site. But if I had just design level permissions on this list, I could apply these formats, which again is really empowering to your end users. And if they're going to go create a new list and they copy your list, it's going to copy those formats over for them. If you're using those site columns, it's going to copy those down there for you. But it's a double-edged sword because they can also then just change that for you. So, take it with what you will. But I think the fact that you don't have to go through the app catalog, you don't have to go through your change approval board and everything else, right, and get everyone to weigh in on the fact that you just wanted to change the color from red to blue is a hugely powerful feature, but it is limited, purposely so, on some of these things. Okay? All right, so let me jump back to the slides so we can just kind of wrap it up here. So I wanted to make sure I showed you the one slide especially. Oh, I didn't mean to click my link. Just kidding. Okay, so this is that formula I mentioned before. All right, so this is, and again, if you type this exact same thing in an expression in Flow as a variable, that will work in every single flow to give you the exact link to that instance of the flow. And then again, just save that to a separate list, or save it to a list item on the list, even if that's hidden. And then you can utilize that and save yourself just a whole lot of trouble. Okay. All right. And again, you can have these slides afterwards. Somehow I'll send them over to Dimitri and you can distribute as necessary. That way you can get that. And then I just wanted to close up here with a few more limitations here. So there's some date part operators, but there's no time parts. For instance, you can do get year, you can get month, you can get the date. But you can't say get hour. I don't know why. It makes me sad. When you're going to do some of these styles, you cannot use parentheses in the styles, except if you're doing an RGBA value. So normally when you're doing colors, try and stick to those class values, because then you could do those theme aware classes. But sometimes, you want to put an exact color. You can do that through that, RGBA, which, allows you to provide that alpha color as well. But as a result, you're not going to be able to do like a URL as an image background, and you're not going to be able to do gradients, which is irritating. And so what you'll end up having to do, and there's a sample, there's an ELF sample that shows how to dynamically position images on top of one another to create those backgrounds, since we can't do it with the URL. But again, we've got some of that covered for you in the samples. When I say schema discrepancies, that's just where you're going to see a red squiggly under the schema line. Ignore it. It's going to say like the child of the 7th dependency is bad. And you go, I don't understand it. Just ignore it. Chris said it was okay. All right. Localization. There is very minor support for localization. You can detect basically like what local, what language they have set, and then you can conditionally show text. But you're going to have to do that conditionally repeatedly throughout your format, and that can be a real hassle. But it is possible, but there's no this format for this language and so on. Form formatting has some slightly different rules with layout, with the lookup columns. We mentioned the body layout. But here's what's awesome. So it's quick and easy visualizations, right? But the idea is I can cut and paste and get a long way, right? So I absolutely recommend don't open that window and just stare at that with the schema there and be like, well, I don't know. First, start with a few samples, right? Go like I showed you, grab a column type that you want to check out, paste the sample in, see how it works, and then just start tweaking, right? That's the number one way to get a cool samples, just to tweak it, and you'll find you learn it a lot quicker that way. Again, that site column integration is great. We mentioned the site designer stuff. I love that it has full support in the site templates, the list templates, and the remote provisioning. So if you're working with PowerShell or whatever it is, and you're copying lists around, all of that's available, and you can apply these that way as well. So if you're you're provisioning out these sites, you can fully include all of this stuff as well. And if you haven't looked into PnP remote provisioning, that's just a side note. You absolutely should. It's awesome. And then it has great performance. So I have set this up on, like a 10,000 list item list, with something like 100 columns across, applying a format on each, because I was bored. It was an exciting time. And it all worked. And part of that's because, it's loading those lists one at a time. But it works really well because it's also rendering all of that in the browser. None of that's rendered on the server side. And I say getting better all the time. We literally get updates. They sneak them in. There are no announcements for whatever reason. These aren't really a part of the roadmap. But they keep making improvements. And the number one way to get that is to watch some videos, which I'll show you. And then, of course, this is the big one for me. No solution. I love SPFX. I absolutely love it. I love working with all that stuff. And it's really, really powerful. And it's not near as scary as my theme. But the idea that I could just do this, I can quickly apply these things and I can help people, that is awesome. Okay, so final stuff here. Tips and tricks. Start with the samples, customize that wizard output. Like I said, use what Microsoft already did for you, right? Don't make it so hard. If you're looking at this debug mode, if you see that, it's only a little helpful. If you turn debug mode on as true and you get some weird calculation that happens, like, oh, you forgot to count that some values are blank, it'll replace your format with that error message there, which is why you want to turn it off, because that will definitely confuse end users. And then write that HTML first. That's usually the easiest way. Like if you're comfortable there, do it that way and go use that tool. There's icons, use them, test in multiple themes, right? There's nothing worse than when your format looks awesome, you deploy it to like 30 sites, and then someone switches the theme colors, right? And you accidentally hard-coded all those colors, and now they're off by 4 shades of red because corporate branding decided that. So use the theme colors. And then the PnP calls. So this is something, we had one today, and the next one is 2 weeks. So every other Thursday, 10 a.m. Eastern, we have these calls, and I often do a list formatting tip. I think I've done something like 60 or 70 of them at this point. And those are all recorded to YouTube. They're on individual topics. I also, preview the new stuff that comes out. So as soon as I'm aware of it, I'll try and make a demo around that. But this is the best way. The best thing about these calls, though, is Microsoft is on there. So if you're upset about something, yell at them right there. It's perfect. Or ask your questions from them. But I highly recommend it. And again, if you don't, if you have a job for whatever reason, you can't attend at 10 a.m. on Thursday, it's all recorded to YouTube. So check it out there. And then you can put it on like, 2x and it'll sound like a squirrel. It's awesome. Okay. And there's my contact info should you want it. All right. Any other questions or anything else going on?
Chris, I've got some quick questions.
Yep.
I've used a lot of this stuff to try to reference things that were metadata columns
Mhm.
that were linked back to the term store. And there seem to be a lot of got yous wrapped around that. Do you guys have many samples or anything that you can point to that works with that kind of data?
There are a few samples for the taxonomy fields, not a lot. But I mean, if you're going to say taxonomy fields, right, gotchas are a given, right? That is, I mean, from the beginning, right?
Yeah.
They are always problematic. I will say they work some. They don't work great. You don't get a lot of extra information off of them. Not like you do, like if you use the new image column, you get a lot of details in there. Where you can pull a lot of information about there. Same with the local. What do you call them? The location column. You get a ton of information as sub properties. But taxonomy, it's not much, if anything, really. So disappointing news.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Awesome.
Yeah, you bet.
All right, let's give Chris a round of applause. Great job, Chris.
Thank you, everybody. Enjoy your drinks and pizza and all that.
All right, thank you, Chris. We have a few closing slides here. So hang back for just another few minutes if you could. So one thing we're doing is we do have an open call for speakers for 2023. We are talking to a number of people for the coming months, so we're going to be finalizing that shortly. But that being said, we want to hear what you're doing. You know, you don't have to be a Chris level expert at a technology to come present. Come share a case study. Tell us about a project that you've done, some successes, some tips and tricks, things that other people in the user group could find really useful. So don't be shy. Let us know. And if you're not comfortable presenting in person, we're open to do it remotely. So upcoming community events. The big one coming up is the Microsoft conference in May in Las Vegas. There's also a European conference in Germany happening shortly thereafter. If you're in the education space, there's a conference in DC coming in June from the same people that used to host SP TechCon. If you're a Microsoft partner, the Inspire conference will be in July with the dates and locations yet to be confirmed. If you are into the Power Platform, there will be a conference in October. This year it's going to be, it looks like in Las Vegas. Last year was in Florida. And of course, Microsoft Ignite is coming back this fall as well. They haven't announced the location yet. Rumors are it might be back in Seattle. But if you're looking to start budgeting and planning, I think these are the top ones to keep an eye on. Did we miss anything? Is there any other events coming up that anyone would like to highlight? All right, let's keep moving forward. To Chris's point, PNP is a phenomenal resource. If you're not already plugged into there, definitely check it out. There's a number of other events that occur on a regular basis. So in addition to the list formatting one that Chris mentioned, there's these other ones that are happening. Definitely come check them out if you're interested. There's also some additional recurring resources in the community. I think this is pretty much the same slides we've had for a while now. We do have other area user groups if you're interested. We believe these are all still pretty active, but we don't have a direct affiliation with them at the moment. So if you're interested in checking out others, there's more than just us in this Boston area. All right, part of this community call is to help each other. So does anyone have any problems or any tips or something that you've crossed that has you banging your head, or you were banging your head and you found a solution? Arthur?
Yes. As it happened, I have two separate people who came up with a similar problem in the same week. They're sending emails out from Microsoft 365 with PDF attachments. If the files are going to people who have Macs, the PDFs get converted to windmail.dat, and they're not readable by the recipients on the Macs. Is there anything that can be done? One of the people said.
Yeah, so quick question on a follow-up there. Are you attaching the file as an email attachment, or are you pasting it in as an embed inside of the mail?
Just the file is attached as a PDF file, correct?
Okay, so it is using the attachment option. Do you have any kind of additional encryption that you're
No.
putting on the files? No, the tenant level or Outlook level?
No, just a simple PDF, and all the people who are on Microsoft Windows machines receive it properly.
Yeah, that's a great question. Anyone in the room or on the call?
When I talked to somebody at Microsoft 365, the person said, oh, that's because Macs are not intelligent machines and they don't know how to handle attachments. And I said, that's not a helpful answer for me. Just curious if anybody has gotten around this. As I said, I had 2 different people come up with this question within the same week, and I said, oh, ouch.
They could actually install Outlook on the Mac
Yeah, they could.
and see if that solves.
So they should be using Outlook on the Mac, or they can use the Outlook web view. If they use the browser interface, it should be fine.
Yeah.
They're very likely trying to use an email client that's not supposed to be used.
I mean, I haven't seen it. I have a Mac and I use the Mac mail as well as Outlook. I have not seen that show up from my dev tenants to me. So if all the clients are working at the same agency, maybe they have some kind of spam filter or something.
These are the people using the Mac, so let's say are relatively unsophisticated users.
Are they going through a business though? Are they using the same? Okay.
No, it's just.
I haven't seen that.
I'm not sure on that one. That's an interesting one.
I don't know if anybody has seen this. I get an unusual client set, and then they have unusual people. So
They're unsophisticated. Have they not performed any updates? They may have an older version.
yeah.
That has been like the #1 way I fix every issue when I'm dealing with a Mac is I just do an update to the OS and it always needs an update and then it always runs well. Like my iPhone, sometimes like apps just stop working the way they need to, like Teams
I
stop
have
working.
no access to these end users.
Yeah.
But not until they need a recent OS, like
Yeah.
2 or 3 back. Like people could have a really old Mac
Okay.
and their OS is outdated. So any outdated OS could have a problem.
Are the PC users that are sending these PDFs using Outlook to clients?
Yes.
This page I'm looking at either says, if Outlook is configured as it normally is to send email in its own format, you can get that on the Mac. You can get the windmail.dat. They suggest changing it to sending email as HTML or plain text.
HTML.
And then it will work.
Yeah, I just found the same thing.
Oh.
Make sure that their mail client is sending and receiving in HTML.
So it's just Microsoft using their own standards.
Something like
Well,
that.
it's just our RTF format sometimes
Right.
generates this.
Probably something like that.
Okay, I could try to change the people sending it. I have them using Outlook on the PC.
Yeah, and they're saying there's a default standard that it sends in.
But the fact that the Windows recipients don't have the problem means that you don't have to request anything of the people that are sending it. It's definitely on the receiving side. And it's very likely the client that they're using either doesn't support HTML formatted emails or it isn't configured to do so. It's just my 2 cents.
So Paul and Mike, can you guys paste that link in the chat window for Arthur?
Excuse me?
They'll paste
Sure.
the blog post in the chat window.
Okay, yeah.
All right. Is anyone else running into any strange issues? Yes.
Well, I'm getting ready to perform a migration, Google Docs and Box. Now, those are basically users. When I perform those migrations, should I have those users installed in Azure so that when the information comes over, it will populate their OneDrive, or does the migration automatically do that?
So first you need to create their user accounts and give them a license. And then the migration tool will be able to write into those accounts. Because when you go to run the migration tool, anyone that you use is going to ask you for a mapping of where things should go.
Okay. And it's 40 terabytes. About how long would that take?
Which migration tool are you using?
SharePoint.
The Mover IO tool, that's part of the admin center there?
Yeah,
Okay. So do keep in mind what those limitations are. So if you have a lot of granular permissions, there are limitations for what's going to come over. There's file path restrictions. Just make sure you dig into those first. But if you're looking at 40 terabytes, it's going to vary.
okay.
But
Just a ballpark.
yeah, I mean,
40 hours, 100 hours.
say give it a couple of months.
Oh. Okay.
It's really going to depend on the ISP that you have as well.
Well, Mover IO is server based, isn't it? With the actual migration queues.
Yeah, but did I miss something? Is he going from cloud to cloud or on-prem to cloud?
Oh, it's a cloud.
Cloud to cloud.
Oh, okay. Never mind then. You're right. No MSPs.
Yeah,
Or
so,
ISPs.
so Microsoft throttles things, Box throttles things, Google throttles things.
That was going to be my next question. Will they still throttle? I thought with using the SharePoint migration, they wouldn't throttle. So
They'll still throttle it, but now you have 3 different places that are applying different levels of throttles. And then the other challenge is that, once something fails, you have to remigrate it.
So what if you did a background migration and then came back in the week before and do a delta?
I'm not sure if the Mover tool supports that. If you were using like a third-party tool, such as
ShareGate or AppPoint.
so ShareGate doesn't have a great box support. But if you were using something like SkySync or DriveIQ as it's called now, or Cloud FastPath, some of these other vendors,
Skykick.
They'll give you a lot more granularity. They'll support, to Sean's point, the full migration and the delta afterwards. For Google Drive, I think BidTitan, their migration was product, and then Quest On Demand has connectors for that. Yeah, if you need any help, be happy to have a call with you and just share some knowledge there.
All right, thank you.
Yep. Great question. Is anyone else running into any gotchas?
I have a new tip.
Yeah, go ahead.
ChatGPT is relatively okay at writing PowerShell.
It is. It's kind of cool.
No.
There's
No,
lots
I
of fun
can't.
with that. Now, it's not perfect, and sometimes it'll put in some little flaws. And what's hilarious is sometimes it'll say, hey, you put in that flaw, and then it'll correct it. But yeah, for those of you that are brand new to PowerShell, I would consider that for getting started. It's super helpful.
All right, thanks, Mike. All right, so in the interest of time, we're going to move forward. So we do have the dates secured for the following meetings. We have this place booked, as well as, of course, online. We're still finalizing the topics, so keep an eye out on our mailing list, as well as our website, social media, the whole 9 yards. But we are excited to start this year strong. Thanks again to our sponsor for tonight, as well as all of our past sponsors that have really supported our group for I think we're going on year number 8 come this May. So it's been a long time running.